big welcome. We do live in strange times, don't we? This is a very unusual arrangement that we have to do our annual meeting by webinar, but as I've been saying all the way through, this is a lot better than not having an annual meeting at all. And I want to just thank the team, the DCF team, for the hard work that they've put in to producing this agenda for you. It's a really interesting and varied number of speakers we've got, and I think you're going to enjoy the next 2 hours. But obviously, bear in mind that it is a webinar and that the system can be a little bit clunky on occasions, but we do want you to ask questions. We do want you to be involved. And we do want you to join in as much as possible. So all the facilitation is there. If you want to ask questions after each speaker, that is certainly a possibility. Most of you will probably be familiar with using these systems. So once again, thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much to the team for putting together this excellent program, and I hope you enjoy it. There will be a short break in the middle at about 25 to 11, just for 10 minutes for a comfort break. But other than that, we'll be running straight through until about 10 past 12. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand over now to Rhiannon. Rhiannon Jones is our Dorset Coast Forum Coordinator. She's been doing an excellent job for us, and she's going to bring us up to date with the work and the activities that the forum has been undertaking over the last 6 and 12 months. So over to you, Rhiannon.
Hello, hi, thank you. So just quickly before I start, I just thought I'd introduce who's sitting around the table here today. So there's familiar faces that you can see or might not be familiar. So we have Martin Sutcliffe, who's our Aquaculture and Fisheries Development Officer. He'll be speaking today. We have Ben Lester and Gary Littledyke, who'll be talking about the exciting kind of revelations in using 5G to improve coastal technology. We have Matt Hosey here today from the FSERM team from BCP, and he's here to talk about the Hulls Bay FSERM scheme and an overview there. We have Alex Curd, who's come along from the MMO, and he'll be talking about the MMO South plans for us, so giving us a bit more of an in-depth explanation there about what's relevant. And Natasha Bradshaw is joining us from UE, talking about the coastal-based approach and how that potentially could work in Dorset. And other members of the team that are present are Nikki, who is giving you a wave. So she's administering this event today, and she's the glue that holds us all together. And we have Stuart and Sarah, who are on the Q&A chat box as well. So any questions you have coming through, they'll be asking them to the members, the speakers here today. Okay, right. So without further ado, let's see if we can work out the first issue of the day of sharing screen, which we should all be used to by now. So, Nikki, can you see my notes pages, or do I need to swap?
You need to swap, Rhiannon.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So this is just the agenda for today. So I know Tony's given a brief run through, and these are the speakers, but we do have a 10-minute break at about sort of 10:50, 10 to 11 as well. So that is the order of the day, finishing at 12:05 roughly. Most of you will be familiar with these functions, but just running through the Q&A, we do encourage you to add your questions as we go along throughout the chat. Obviously, Stuart and Sarah will be keeping an eye on that. I've just shown a little bit on the bottom of what function that is. So it's not the chat box function, it's the Q&A function, because that allows you to enter a question in, and also for other people to like the questions that they would like to see answered, and vice versa. So you can get a bit interactive there and comment. We will answer as many questions as we can after the presentations. We have a 5-minute section for that, but any unanswered questions we'll still put to the speaker, so you will get them answered, and there'll be a meeting report. So the Dorset Coast Forum, I mean, most of you know because you are here, is an independent, strategic, neutral, multi-sector partnership. And this is what the team currently look like. So like most organisations, we've had some new faces join us since our last meeting, which was actually in 2019 was our last in-person meeting. So we said goodbye to some familiar faces, but also, you know, we've got retained some familiar ones too. So we have Tony Flux, who's introduced you today. We've got Lee Hardy, who's our Vice Chair, and Bridget Betts, who you might all know as a Secretariat. I, of course, am Rhiannon Jones, the Dorset Coast Forum Coordinator. I've just introduced Nikki and Martin and Sarah and Steve as well. Sarah and Stuart, sorry. And then we have Steve Booth, who's our DCF Project Officer, and his main task is to deliver the Weymouth Gateway project. So that's the current team set up as we have it today. The topics that we work across, just really quickly, we work across a broad range of topics across the coast, and this is just a section of what we do. So we're currently working on a project to do with coastal defences in Swanage. We have fisheries and aquaculture development work led by Martin Sutcliffe. We have a coastal community regeneration scheme happening in Weymouth. We've been involved in health and wellbeing projects as well with natural choices in the past. And of course, Litter Free Coast and Sea work across marine and coastal pollution and litter. And we've also done some work with marine planning and policy as well. So we do get involved in quite a lot of aspects of the coast. The type of work that we do across that is our bread and butter is partnership building and networking. We also do small and large project management. We do consultation and engagement. We can provide facilitation and conflict resolution for controversial or sensitive issues. We provide bid writing and partnership project development for our members. And we produce resources and disseminate information for our membership, but also for the public too. And we've recently developed and delivered strategies like the Fishery Advisable Action Group and the mariculture strategy, and more recently the Dorset Harbour strategy as well. So our current projects, we have lots of projects to talk about, so I will just give you a real whistle-stop tour of what we've been working on. But I would be remiss not to mention the Dorset Coastal Connections project, which is one of the larger projects which was supposed to finish in March 2020. But of course, due to COVID, there has been some delays to that project. So it was a massive project that we've been really proud to deliver alongside some excellent organisations and people. And due to COVID, we have had some delays, but we've finally been able to produce our celebration film, which I will send out in a follow-up email to everybody. It's the Dorset Coastal Connections, the link that you can see at the bottom. And that really does show the scale and the breadth of work that has gone into this kind of partnership project, which has been right the way across the Dorset coast. And it's been fantastic. We've been really proud to deliver it. So it was a 3-year project, which obviously had 18 projects as part of that. And they've been centred on connecting people to the coast, connecting communities and connecting Dorset to the wider world as well. So it's been an excellent project. It's been very challenging to deliver, but I think the team has done it justice in its delivery. This is just some of the outcomes of the project, and we're particularly proud of all the improvements that have been made. So you can see there's lots of footpath and cycleway improvements. There's been lots of public realm improvements, lots of consultation with the communities on how they wanted to see these public realm spaces develop and be changed. We've created 34 new tourism facilities. We've supported over 450 businesses directly. And we've also commissioned 15 artists to really improve that artistic thread and connect those projects along the coast. One of the things that is particularly great is the fact that we've been able to add value to the economy. So for every £1 invested, we've had £1.60 added to the economy through creating jobs, supporting businesses and increasing visitor numbers and expenditure. So just an example of some of the projects that was part of that portfolio is the Highcliffe Zigzag Path. So this project was to reinvigorate the zigzag path between Highcliffe Castle and the beach. And as you can see, the retaining wall there was clad in recycled timber from the beach groins, which has kind of led to this really attractive kind of walkway that provides an access route for many. And that is the zigzag path from another kind of angle, so you can really see the scale of it. One of the larger projects in this portfolio is obviously the Pool seafront developments. So this project took place over Shore Road, Camphor Cliffs, Branksome Chine and Flaghead Chine, which you can see there. This was a huge project and it included enhancing the public plaza areas, new landscaping, artistic installations, enhancing the land train features at Branksome Chine, refurbishing toilets and showers and a new beach office and extended kiosk at Shore Road as well. So the Canford Cliff project was postponed due to a cliff slip, which I'm sure many of you know, and this delayed development there, but there are plans in progress and you can find those on the BCP Seafront Projects website. And the West Bay Welcome Hub on the western side of the county was the creation of a bespoke concrete circular seating area for residents and visitors to eat, relax and enjoy. And as someone who regularly visits there, I can tell you it's very busy, so that's quite successful. And on the other end, the River Lim was about kind of improving the connection between Lyme and Upper Lyme by creating this idyllic walking route with an arts trail to follow alongside with as well. So obviously there's 14 other projects to check out. So I do encourage you to watch that video just to get a kind of a glimpse of the effort that has gone into that project and the fantastic outcomes. I won't dwell too much on aquaculture and fisheries development because Martin Sutcliffe will be talking about that later in the morning. But our key kind of aims there are to deliver even the Dorset mariculture strategy and also update the Dorset and East Devon Fisheries Local Action Group community-led local development strategy. So supporting the aquaculture and fisheries development sector. One of the long-standing projects of the forum has been litter-free coast and sea. So since 2020, they've been working on a number of different projects, but their main one has been the Bathing Beach Profiles, which was a 5-year project that launched in 2020. So the project aim is to work with agencies, businesses and local communities to engage with the community surrounding the beach locations and find collaborative solutions that improve everyone's enjoyment of the Dorset beaches. So the key approach there really was to establish what the sources of pollution are, what the priorities for action are at each beach, create a baseline of data so you can actually measure the success of these campaigns, work out the grouping of the bathing waters and which beaches to work on first, and also working with local stakeholders and groups to then tailor those campaigns and those messages for each of the beaches. So that's quite a chunky piece of work that is still ongoing and has been working really well. Obviously, following some of the awful littering incidents across the coast, Litter-Free Coast and Sea ran a summer campaign last year to help kind of remind our visitors and our residents to keep our beaches litter-free. And they're rerunning that campaign with the tagline of Respect, Protect, Collect this year, which runs alongside the summer visitor campaign that Sally King will be talking about later. They've also launched an excellent video called Love Your Harbour, which is about spreading the message to mariners about what to do with toilet waste and the kind of problems that are caused by discharging raw sewage in the harbours. So Litter-Free Coast and Sea, actually, there's going to be a change afoot there as well. They are merging with Litter-Free Dorset to become a wider reaching campaign on a catchment level, which is excellent. So just watch this space for that. Another one of our larger projects is the Weymouth Station Gateway. So this is a significant project that we are delivering. It's currently 1 year into the delivery, and the aim of the project is to make improvements to the area to benefit local businesses and tourism by improving the visitor experience, providing sustainable transport infrastructure, including bus links and safer pedestrian access, and improve wayfinding and interpretation. So we've held a community consultation in 2020 to find out what the community actually wanted to see in the train station area. And overwhelmingly, people wanted a safer, cleaner and greener area with more sustainable transport links. So we're currently working on a design which will incorporate everything that everyone wants, but also within our limited budget of £600,000. So it's quite a challenging project, but we do hope to be able to show all the plans that are coming together for that soon. A few other projects that we've been involved with this year are the Swanage Town Centre Flood Defence Project. So we've been involved in the engagement and consultation side of things. We've held an event with key stakeholders to enable them to help shape what those coastal defences might look like or have input into the impacts of them, and also what public realm improvements could potentially be added to those defences as well to really enhance the area. So that consultation has been run, and there will be wider consultation with the public if funding is successful for those coastal defences. We've also been involved, as I mentioned earlier, with the Dorset Harbour Strategy, where we've been helping to develop a strategy with the Dorset Council Harbours Committee on how they want to see these 3 harbours under their jurisdiction develop over the next 10 years. So we've held consultations in 2020 with the Weymouth, West Bay and Lyme Regis community, and we're currently developing a draft strategy which will go out for consultation in the autumn this year, hopefully. And some of you may have attended the Studland Bay Marine Conservation engagement events, which we ran on behalf of the MMO. So they have been proposing management measures for the Studland Bay Conservation Area, and they wanted a neutral party to help facilitate feedback on their management proposals. So we held a key stakeholder event and a public engagement event alongside those, and the feedback report from those events and the next steps that the MMO are proposing will be out later in the month. So look out for those. And of course, we work across sustainable swanage as well, which is what Sarah Sperling works on, which is a group established in Swanage as part of the town's ongoing efforts to become a more sustainable community and protect their precious environment. So future work, as well as delivering all of those projects and the ad hoc events and everything else that we do as part of our core work, we're also just kicking off another project, which is about building resilience in flood disadvantaged communities. It's an Interreg funded project, so we're working with partners in England and France to use social innovation in building resilience to flooding. It's a £3.4 million project, of which we are a small partner in, and we'll be focusing our efforts in Weymouth to help build on the already excellent work that is already being done there. So essentially the project aims to engage communities in flood resilience through building a network, developing plans, creating resources and trainings for those networks in the community, and also overarchingly to develop a best practice for engaging hard to reach communities in flood and coastal risk management and using alternative methods to get people engaged. So we've just recruited to this role, and we hope to be able to introduce our new project officer soon to our members. So look out for that. And lastly, a big chunk of work for the team to undertake in the coming year is really to update the Dorset Coast strategy. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is a high-level, non-statutory document which helps to promote consensus among our members on the way we can work together to enhance the planning and management of the Dorset Coast and its inshore waters. So it cuts across many different themes, and we're now looking at how we need to adapt it to reflect the current situation along the coast and the key issues that we should be tackling as the Dorset Coast Forum. We did run a membership survey on this back in April. So for those of you who just responded, thank you very much. It was really useful information. And our job now is really to take that information and apply that feedback to the development of a new strategy for the next 10 years, which will accommodate what our collective members feel we should be working towards as a forum together, and also reflect the modern day issues that the coast faces. So there will be more engagement with our membership as this process develops. So I really hope that you'll get involved with that and are eager to get involved and help shape what we'll be working towards, and just look out for that really. That is my whistle stop tour. I think as always, it's been a really busy year, and as Tony said, you know, hard under these circumstances. So I just want to thank our staff for delivering these fantastic projects, our funders for enabling us to deliver these fantastic projects and working with us, and of course our valued membership who support the forum and provide ideas and discussion on what we should be doing and basically the work of the forum as a whole. So thank you very much. And I think that's it. So back to you, Tony, unless there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Brianna. And as I've said before, and as my predecessor said, I'm constantly amazed at how much volume of work and quality of work comes out of the DCF, considering how small the team actually is. It really is a most impressive setup in that respect. So yeah, Sarah, I think you're going to be in charge of questioning or Q&As. Are there any questions for Rhiannon?
Hi, we've got one question from David Harris. It's, what is the relationship between the DCF and the Jurassic Coast Trust?
So we have quite a close relationship with them. They sit on our steering group, so they're a valued member, and also they are obviously a member of the forum as well. So we work quite closely and collaborate where possible. Obviously, we are two separate organisations, but as a forum, you know, we work as a collective. So we do have quite a close working relationship with them.
Okay. Are there any more questions coming in, Sarah, on the chat or? Gary, is there any more? Anything coming in?
I
That's the
don't
only
think.
question. Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we'll move on. Our next speaker, our first speaker, is someone I've known for quite a long time, Natasha Bradshaw. She's a doctoral researcher at the University of West of England. I've worked with Natasha on a number of projects in the past. She's a really good person. And I'm really pleased that she's here today to tell you about the COBA project, the coastal-based approach. I won't say too much about it. I've worked a little bit recently on this one with Natasha, but I'm going to hand over straight away now then to you, Natasha, and tell us all about COBA.
Thank you, Tony. Can everybody see and hear me appropriately? Give me the sign. Yeah. All
Yep.
good, Tony? Can you hear?
Yep, I can hear you and I can see
Okay,
the
brilliant.
slides.
Brilliant. This is not my favorite way of presenting, but necessary these days at the moment. Hi, everybody. I wish I could see you. I'm Natasha. At the moment, I'm doing a PhD in collaborative governance for coastal stewardship at University of West of England, Bristol. But previously, I spent 10 years working for 3 different estuary partnerships in southwest England. I know the Dorset coast quite well. I live in Mid Devon, so it's really nice to be here today talking to you. I also was involved in setting up the Coastal Partnerships Network. It's now 15 years ago. So coastal partnerships are really at the heart of my, I guess, passion for the coast, and led me to do a PhD at UE over the last 5 years, which is coming to fruition, hopefully. Okay, so over the last couple of years, in the background and over the last 6 months more publicly, a few colleagues, including Tony, have been discussing the proposition for a coastal-based approach around the whole of at least the English coastline. So I'm really glad today to be given the chance to spend 15 minutes explaining what this coastal-based approach is or could be. And it's very much something that's under discussion. So hopefully you can see there the advocates of the coastal-based approach, COBA committee, including Tony, and members of other statutory bodies and associations, networks, and coastal champions. So really today I'm speaking on their behalf. We have regular committee meetings now to roll out the concept of the COBA approach. Let's just say that COBA is nothing new really. It's just looking for more support for the work that partnerships like Dorset Coast Forum are doing, because we don't have full coverage of coastal partnerships around the whole coast. So in promoting the COBA approach, we're really looking to explain what forums like Dorset Coast Forum and the Dorset Coast Strategy does, and to try and support it further and fill gaps where we don't have coastal partnership work like Dorset Coast Forum. So in explaining what is COBA, we're saying its approach is for integrated place-based local delivery for the entire English coast through collaborative partnerships, and a call for sustained national coordination to make the life of coastal partnerships and the work they do more sustained, because we're very aware that many partnership officers hop from project to project. So we're looking for more kind of seed funding that keeps the partnership initiatives in a more stable situation, so we can make even better value for money out of their efforts. And an invitation specifically for trial locations to demonstrate, probably in your case, in Dorset, the work that you do. And as Tony put it just now, he said, you know, it's incredible how much value and quality of work is achieved by a small team of people. And so we really believe that this approach is something that the whole coast of the UK really deserves. So this presentation covers 3 questions really. Why COBA? What is it? And how do we further what we've already got? It's important, I think it's probably apparent by now, that what we're proposing is nothing new. It's an approach. Some of you might have been involved in integrated coastal zone management policy a couple of decades ago. It seems to have kind of gone in the shadow of marine planning and the MMO's work, but coastal policy is really important. And so it asks for a bit more refocus on some of the ICZM thinking that we had a decade or so ago. It aims to improve clarity, coordination, and reduce complexity for coastal communities, working together across the land-sea interface rather than within administrative units, which, as members of Dorset Coast Forum, you'll be familiar with this. It's just working for the Dorset coast and the influences on the Dorset coast. Some areas of the coast don't have that sort of ecosystem perspective for an area of coastline in the way that you do through Dorset Coast Forum. So it's not, sometimes easy to say what it's not. It's not proposing new regulation or new institutions. It's about building on the strengths of what we've got. And at this time, it's particularly important that we invest in our coast and focus on our coast as a kind of entity, because of how valued it is and how particularly important it is for the country's blue health and managing the level of interest we're likely to see this summer particularly. I think it's going to really highlight the need for stronger collaboration amongst all those involved in managing our coastal resources. Now, the reason we're calling this COBA is because of CABA. If we were in person, I'd say, ask, could you give me a show of hands if you've heard of CABA? Because the catchment-based approach came through the Water Framework Directive 10 years ago, and the need to further the objectives of that European directive. And government saw that to really successfully implement the river basin district management approach, catchments needed to be looked at as entities. And we've now got a full suite of 106 catchment partnerships across the whole of England and Wales. And they've shown and received good publicity around the level of investment and the returns on that public investment. And over the last 10 years of monitoring that have shown that the value on returns to investment can be up to £6.50 per pound invested. I think it was 1 in 3 last year. And I noted in the introduction, Rhiannon mentioned the Dorset Coastal Connections project has identified a ratio of 1 to £1.60. So that's exactly the kind of evidence we need to demonstrate the value of this kind of partnership working. And CABA has done that really well. The coastal partnerships don't have full coverage, and they don't have the same kind of monitoring to justify the sustained investment. So many of them hop from project to project. There's not such good consistency of staff, people move on, some of their partnerships have been lost, some new kind of initiatives form, but we basically are saying that there's a lot more potential to be gained from these partnerships if there's sustained investment in them. So the proposition is about building efficient ways of working that are demonstrated by coastal partnerships, building on experience from CABA over the last 10 years, but recognising that actually the coastal and estuary partnerships have existed for 30 years in some parts of the country, and some of them have got some amazing experience, and we need to share those lessons more widely across the country and get a full complement for the coast, or at least start looking at where there are gaps where we could fill this approach. This diagram has been developed over the last couple of years and basically shows what many of you will be familiar with, the number of organisations working across the kind of coastal space. But when you map them, it's very clear to see that most of them have either a local specific focus, a sectoral focus, an offshore focus, an upstream focus. And coastal partnerships are those that really focus on the land-sea interface at a scale which people can most relate to. And the partnership working involved through initiatives like Dorset Coast Forum really helps strengthen communication. For example, as Rhiannon said, in in organising stakeholder engagement activities for the MMO recently. But there are some initiatives which maybe could focus a bit more on the coast, like the local nature partnerships, the local enterprise partnerships, and others like the regional flood and coastal committees and the S&B coastal groups that maybe could have a little bit more holistic view encouraged through this COBA approach. But basically, COBA is encouraging more join up across the land sea interface, and also more join up between sort of local community issues and national coordination, and finding the balance between national and local spending and priorities, which is often exemplified in areas where there's strong needs for and calls for coastal protection and different sustainability challenges. So the proposition is a call for sustained national coordination, filling the gaps where the coastal partnerships don't exist, and perhaps looking for central match funding to help keep the continuity of local partnership effort on the ground. An annual evaluation scheme, a bit like CABA, that works for coastal partnerships and helps evidence the value of the investment. And delivering, as I've said, where there are gaps, and encouraging collaboration between institutions and engaging communities in stewardship activity. When we look on how this approach could be furthered in reality, we have put a call out for trial locations. When I say we, I mean the COBA committee, have started putting effort in a couple of directions on potential funding bids, and have reached out to many of the statutory agencies to discuss it. So basically what's happening at the moment is discussion amongst different networks, associations and statutory bodies on whether and how this is something that government should consider. And there are active discussions going on in the Environment Agency, Natural England, MMO, and others about next steps. In the meantime, we've asked Coastal Partnerships through the Coastal Partnerships Network and Amy Pryor, based at the Thames Estuary Partnership, which coastal partnerships might be interested in being part of this, promoting this approach. Myself, in my spare time alongside my PhD, with the support of Thames Estuary Partnership, have done some mapping just to look at how the different policies and requirements and institutions around the coast are sort of knitting together, and where the gaps in the overlaps might be. So you'll be familiar with the role of the IFCAs and the scale of IFCA work. So really these maps were just looking at how different institutions work in relation to coastal partnerships, and where there are overlaps that maybe could be simplified or gaps that need to be filled. So I'm just skimming through these slides to give you a feel for some of that mapping work that's started, but it's very much work in progress. And those are the coastal partnerships that have said they'd be interested in trialling this approach. Okay, I think I'm probably running up to time. So finally, my key messages. COBA is an approach to support integrated place-based local delivery for the entire English coast through collaborative partnerships, a call for sustained national coordination, and an invitation for trial locations. Okay, I'm very happy to take questions.
Great, thank you for that, Tasha.
Thank you, Tasha.
So I think there is one question, isn't there, Stuart?
Yes, so it was framed more as a comment from Nicholas Reed, saying, interesting in the list of collaborative organisations that Historic England is missing. Heritage management is an essential part of coastal management and sometimes get missed off. I can see Natasha's nodding in agreement.
Extremely valid point, and I am guilty of maybe not reaching out to them. That's at the next committee. Very good suggestion, thank you.
Any more points anybody wants to raise before we move on?
From myself, actually, I just wanted to because obviously we're really lucky, as Tasha said, to have quite a well-functioning coastal partnership here in Dorset. You know, we have loads of members, very supportive. We have an excellent sort of range of people sat around our steering group from very diverse sectors. I just wanted to pick up on one point about the LMP and LEPs and how they are really critical to work with, actually. And it's something that we've definitely been trying to improve links with the LNP. Certainly, we've had a meeting recently with Maria, as some of our participants might know, about how we can work a bit closer together. And we've worked quite closely with the LEP as well, because I think, you know, we are a coastal county. You know, some of our major developments are along the coast, so it's really important. And certainly working on Dorset Coastal Connections, which was all about kind of jobs and adding value to the economy, you know, the LEP were quite key and important and supportive of that project. So working with those kind of partnerships is just fantastic, really. It just takes it to another level. And also, I just wanted to raise the point on how lucky we are, as Tasha showed from that map, that we work quite closely next to the Devon Maritime Forum and the Solent Forum and the Dorset Coast Forum. So we have quite a stretch of coast that is covered quite nicely by partnership working, which I think we're very fortunate. And so sometimes maybe we take that for granted a little bit in other areas of the country, just because things are set up so well here. And they're also quite long-term partnerships that we have there. So that I think the Devon Maritime Forum has been running for 20-something years. Solent have been running for a little bit longer than us, like 25 years or something. So we are in a really fortunate position. And I really hope that, you know, I certainly value it. Everybody sat around the table, and I really hope that our members of the Dorset Coast Forum value it as well. So all these connections that we can have, and hopefully when we have a meeting in person, we can improve those connections and get back to all those conversations that we have, which I'm really looking forward to. Sorry, I think there's another question in the chat, actually, so I'll stop talking myself.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Rhiannon. I agree that, you know, Dorset Coast Forum in a way is probably one of the leading and most stable partnerships. I mean, even Devon Maritime Forum that you mentioned has really struggled to sustain its officer. And you know, it's so worth the investment.
We have valued support here.
Yeah, I would really encourage Dorset Coast Forum to think, you know, if the approach takes off, what would you do as a trial COBA location to further that even more? Or maybe more relevant, what would you like to share with other locations that don't have so much experience?
Exactly. I think there's one question in the chat, isn't there, Sarah?
Yes, from Simon Cripps. The Dorset LMP does take a holistic approach covering coast and sea, but differs in its approach from DCF. Do you see DCF as a COBA organisation, or are you proposing new specific organisations for the coast?
Okay, great question. Thanks. That offers me an opportunity to clarify. I would see Dorset Coast Forum as advocating the COBA approach. So where there are coastal partnerships like Dorset Coast Forum, you don't need anything new. It's just to fill gaps where there aren't similar coordination effort like Dorset Coast Forum. The map that I showed in the presentation showed about 50 coastal partnerships around the country, and the fact that they haven't got full coverage. So I think, to answer my own question that I put to Rhiannon, you know, we would ideally look for Dorset Coast Forum to share experience with somewhere else in the country that hasn't got a similar collaborative entity. And my presentation hopefully illustrated the need for that, and the number of partnerships that are doing active work, and our mapping work is trying to identify where those gaps are. I mean, I personally know where some of the gaps are, for example, the whole of Cornwall. So Cornwall, as a county, Cornwall has said we would like to trial the COBA approach because they don't have local coastal estuary partnerships anymore. They've had them in the past, but they've waned. So that's just one example. Does that answer the question?
The key point is, and you made it in your opening address, is that we're not suggesting another layer of government or even another layer of management. It is a corporate, an incorporated approach that sort of links up the existing organisations better and fills up the gaps, or stretches the gaps, I suppose. That's my view.
Great. I think we need to move on to Martin. Actually, he's got his camera switched on. He's ready to go. So we'll let him take over.
It's Martin Sutcliffe. Hello, Martin.
Hi, Tony.
You again. And the future of agriculture, innovation. We know that mariculture and Brexit have caused quite a bit of conflict and angst in the last 6 months. So what are you going to tell us, Martin? Is it all going to be okay?
Yes, Tony, in short. No. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for the introduction. So, yes, I'll run through, I think probably the main question that I'll be asking or posing is, can Dorset be the future of aquaculture innovation? I thought it might be helpful to start by looking at what actually innovation is. So it can take many forms, but broadly speaking, it generally tends to fall under 2 categories: doing, using, and interacting, which is, I would suggest, it's probably more business-led in the field, people actually doing stuff and figuring out what works and what doesn't work for them. And then the science, tech, and innovation-led innovation, which tends, in my head again, to be more academia-led and more theory-based lab work and things that are kind of more a little bit removed from the coal face. It's probably a good way to put that. So how does that fit to aquaculture? Well, it can be anywhere throughout the supply chain. It feeds. Recently, the Aquaculture Stewardship Council have released strict feed standards. That was just yesterday, and I think that could well be something to aspire to for UK aquaculture producers and UK aquaculture feed producers. Environmental sensing, which I'm sure the 5G Royal Dorset team will talk about later. We have some trials going on in that field, looking at how 5G can be used to develop a more kind of remote sensing field for working with offshore infrastructure. Processing, and then power supply as well for RAS, or recirculating aquaculture systems. I think that's probably a critical thing for the green and blue credentials of the emerging sector of RAS production. And then disease management. Selective breeding is probably a good example there. It might sound a little far-fetched, but that's actually been happening for years. In the hobby ornamental fish trade, for example, koi carp have been interbred and selectively bred for years and years. And then more recently in the marine aquarium trade, clownfish or Nemos have been kind of selectively bred to produce more diverse coloration and more kind of desirable animals for people to buy. And in fact, a Dorset trout producer has been developing a unique strain of trout, which is more resistant to some of the more common diseases associated with trout production. I think it's important to stress that, this disease management and this kind of selective breeding isn't necessarily genetic modification. It's just enabling selective breeding and being able to select more resilient fish or more resilient animals to overcome some issues. And then a more strategic approach and regional strategies, which I'll talk to a little bit more about later. So what will the English aquaculture sector look like? It's small production levels at the moment. I think at the moment we're around about 8,000 tonnes per annum, which if you compare that to the Scottish sector is very much smaller. I think it's important to point out that it's not likely that it will be fin fish in cages. So I can't see, in my opinion, salmon cages being deployed off the English coast. There's numerous reasons for that. The geography, the water temperatures, all sorts of different things. I think more likely it's going to be dominated by algae, shellfish, and then recirculating aquaculture systems, or RAS systems, which is in effect animals in tanks onshore. I think this has all been supported very well with an ambitious English aquaculture strategy, which was released in November of last year, which aims to grow production to 80,000 tonnes, so tenfold over the next 20 years. So why Dorset? Well, we have numerous reasons why it should be Dorset. We have generally good water quality for seaweeds, with good access to key ports: Poole, Portland, Weymouth, West Bay. We're not too far from London, believe it or not, which is appealing for investors. And we have backing from the Department for International Trade. We have something called a high potential opportunity for sustainable aquaculture, which is a shiny brochure that sits in consulates around the globe and highlights the sector that's already working in Dorset. We have a strong aquaculture sector in Dorset, as those who attended the meeting in 2019 and remember I highlighted. And we have a good support organisation as well. We have CFAS, who are based in Weymouth. The Southern Ithaca are very good at delivering aquaculture work, and obviously work in Poole Harbour really well with the aquaculture sector. We have a strong university network, and the local enterprise partnership in Dorset is very much behind the aquaculture sector. And then we have the Dorset Investment Prospectus that was released earlier this year, which highlights aquaculture as a key sector for growth. The local industrial strategy is the same. And we have our recent, or soon to launch rather, marine aquaculture course, which is at Kingston Morwood College. And I think as well, it provides a USP, yet another USP, I must add, for the county. You know, we've got a beautiful landscape, we've got the Jurassic Coast, and I think aquaculture could well be the next USP for the county. So why now? Well, there's political momentum, sorry. I've just outlined the strategic alignment with a lot of different documents across Dorset, both Dorset Council and BCP, both buy into sustainable aquaculture. The Dorset Investment Prospectus I've mentioned, the local industrial strategy, and the skills list as well. That course that Kingston Morwood obviously ties quite closely to that. I've put COVID up there because it's actually focused the public's mind a little bit more. There was when COVID first struck and the first lockdown hit, the fisheries and aquaculture sector were hit fairly hard. But what's almost happened is that there's been a shift in people's mindset and where they get their seafood from. And people are thinking a lot more about kind of supply chains and carbon miles and all sorts of things like that go around sourcing sustainable seafood. I mentioned the training courses, obviously, at Kingston Morwood, and it all kind of ties into the net zero agenda. You know, if we can reduce food miles and we can have high value RAS systems close to some of the larger conurbations, then obviously these can grow good value, high sustainable seafood that's then delivered into the conurbations with a fairly low carbon footprint. And so the English aquaculture strategy, this was published in 2020. It was really pleasing for us to see that it holds the Dorset strategy, which I'll come to in a second, as a key to realizing some of the aspirations that are highlighted in the English strategy. The key thing from our perspective and from my perspective is that it outlines an aquaculture innovation centre as a critical priority to developing the English sector. And the Dorset Mariculture strategy, which was launched in August of last year, so 2020, it has 4 themes. One of those is dedicated support, which is my role and my job. With training and skills, which we're working obviously to develop the course at Kingston Morwood, and then we're also looking to try and develop an apprenticeship pathway. Infrastructure, which is really around developing the ports and the processing facilities that are needed. And then research and development, which is about bringing around some of the, trying to overcome some of the issues that currently face the sector. So the Dorset strategy has really given the sector in Dorset a collective voice, probably one of the first times. And over the last 18 months, I've been working to deliver some of the key objectives outlined in that. One of those, which you may well be familiar with by now, is the delivery of an aquaculture innovation centre in Dorset. And this obviously ties into the to the English aquaculture strategy, which I've mentioned just previously. And so I think there's a few key questions that we need to ask. How do we deliver that? How do we drive innovation forward in Dorset or in England? Who will fund it? What will it look like in Dorset? And how does an English aquaculture innovation centre fit? And so there are quite a number of steps along that route. There's an economic study, which is required. A lot of the economic kind of hard data that councillors and politicians like, such as GVA and jobs added and value to actual coastal communities, is sometimes buried away for the aquaculture sector. It's a small sector, as I referred to earlier, and a lot of the data is generally lumped in with other sectors such as forestry and other things that don't really relate to the aquaculture sector in general. So we need to get this economic study required, and we're preparing a bid to that aim to bring some partners in and actually develop that economic study and figure out how it would work. Part of that would also be to develop a business plan and a business model and come up with concept ideas of what the space would look like, how industry would interact with it, and how that would actually work in reality. And then, of course, that needs funding long term. So how do we figure out that it's actually going to be a long-term sustainable project and it will actually facilitate growth of the sector, not just across Dorset and the southwest, but across the whole of England? It's important to point out that I think there is obviously a Scottish or a sustainable aquaculture innovation centre, and the idea is not to replicate that. There's a very much difference between the two sectors, between England and Scotland. Obviously, Scotland is dominated by the Scottish sector, by the Scottish salmon sector, and as I said earlier, I think the English sector will go in a very much different direction. So it requires something new and something different, and something that will allow the English sector to really flourish. And then obviously we need to get some partnership agreements in place, along with some of the key partners that could potentially be involved in that, and would tap into our Dorset Coast Forum membership to ensure that throughout this process, we need to tap into our stakeholder engagement. We've got strong DCF membership, and I also chair the Southwest Aquaculture Network, and I work quite closely with Seafish across the wider English sector. And it's very, very important that we ensure that we bring stakeholders along with us. And that's not just in the aquaculture sector. I'm talking about the wild capture sector. I'm talking about coastal communities, R&D, academia. We need to ensure that everybody is on board and everybody's pulling in the same direction. So to come back to the question I posed at the start of the presentation, is Dorset the future for aquaculture innovation? Well, I actually believe that yes, it is. For all of those reasons that I've listed, there's political will, the timing seems to be right. We have strategies in place. There is stakeholder backing from the sector. COVID and net zero agenda all fit into that. And so, yes, I honestly do believe that Dorset can well be the future for aquaculture innovation in England. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions coming in, Sarah?
Yes, we've got a couple of quick questions. We've got any plans to expand the Dorset mariculture strategy aquaculture across the southwest, from Lee Cocker.
There aren't any plans at the moment, Lee, but I think obviously you know the work that we're doing through the Southwest Aquaculture Network and Maritime UK Southwest, and that feeds into the wider Southwest region. I think the other counties in the region are kind of looking at Dorset and thinking that, you know, that Dorset mariculture strategy fits really well with the sector locally, and there's almost a bit of envy from other local counties that they want to start moving that forwards. I mean, I'd be happy to work collaboratively across the wider Southwest to develop a wider Southwest strategy. I think that's a really good step in the right direction, but at the moment there aren't any plans to do that.
Okay, we've got a quite technical question, I think, Martin. Let's see how you can answer this. Some species of red algae have been shown to significantly reduce methane emissions in cattle if added to feedstock. Mm-hmm. Is this an opportunity? Not sure if this includes any native species, but it might be worth investigating. And that's from Peter Tinsley. Yeah, that's absolutely true, Peter. They do. The issues that we've got with that is actually the supply of seed. So the kind of that embryonic stage of the seaweeds. Red seaweeds are particularly difficult to crack the life cycle of. Kelps have been done and dusted, and that's pretty much well known. But some of the more technical species are a little bit more difficult to rear in a hatchery. So large scale cultivation requires that hatchery. And there's very few commercial seaweed hatcheries in the UK at the moment. So I think it's almost a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. We need the hatcheries to come on board to produce the seed, be able to crack the life cycle, and then we can actually start growing it on a large commercial scale. Great answer. Okay, and a question from Bridget Retz. Are the local enterprise partnership, the LEP, supporting this financially?
Not currently, they're not. They're not currently supporting it financially. However, they are very supportive of the work that we're doing. It fits in with the Dorset Investment Prospectus. It's highlighted in there, and it's also highlighted in the local industrial strategies, both as key sectors for growth. The Aquaculture Innovation Centre is one of the key initiatives in the Dorset Investment Prospectus as well.
Martin, have you got any idea what the Innovation Centre might cost to set up? I'm not thinking so much about running costs, that's a separate exercise, but in terms of capitalisation, have you got any kind of ballpark figures yet?
Ballpark figures are difficult, Tony, but there's kind of two schools of thought, really. I think, you know, you've got a brand new shiny centre, which is, you know, built from scratch on a brownfield site that is obviously going to be a multi-million-pound investment. But then the other school of thought, I suppose, actually there's three schools of thought. The other school of thought is that it's a repurpose of an existing building. You know, there's some existing buildings perhaps around the Portland area or Weymouth area that could easily be repurposed, into a kind of a hub or a center where people could come together and carry out this innovation work. And then there's also been talk of developing a kind of a campus of sites across the Southwest that specialize in individual areas of aquaculture and kind of all come together under that one umbrella. So it's difficult to put a price on it, but obviously when you go from that brand new shiny center in one space down to kind of the campus sites, you've obviously got a sliding scale of cost. I'm
just wondering whether there's any opportunity to link it into one of the universities.
We work quite well. We work quite closely with both Exeter and Plymouth University in developing a lot of the ideas that have come forward so far. There's obviously a lot of work going on at Exeter University in the sphere of aquaculture alongside seaweed, and also at Plymouth as well, looking at how aquaculture infrastructure can actually fit in with MPAs and how they can provide benefits to the environment, which is obviously quite a marked opposite of what the initial kind of investment in the Scottish sector, for example, where the environmental impacts were quite heavy when it first got going 50 odd years ago.
We've got one final question. I know we're due for a break. Is there time, Rhiannon?
If you could answer it really quickly, I think it's a yes or no answer. Yeah, you can ask it, Stuart.
Could the Aquaculture Innovation Centre include Fisheries Innovations too? That's from Sam Fanshawe.
Yes. There you go.
There you go. Great. We can elaborate on that.
Well, I don't know why not. Why can't it?
Yeah, I think we're running slightly over time. So if we reduce the 10-minute break to a 5-minute break, and if we could see, we'll turn off our cameras and then we'll turn them back on when we're ready, set to present in 5 minutes. So that will take us to 10:02 to be precise. But so when we turn back, 11:02, that's right. Okay, so we'll turn off our cameras and we'll see you back here in 5 minutes just for a quick comfort break. Okay, I think we're back. Hopefully everybody's had time just to get a quick, well, maybe not a cup of tea, but a drink of water and a quick comfort break. Tony, over to you.
Yes, indeed. Gary and Ben, are you with us? Yes, you are. Excellent. Gary Littledyke and Ben Lester. I love the title, From Agribots to Landslides, using 5G to improve coastal technology. 5G is a bit of a Cinderella at the moment for all of us. We're not quite sure where it's going to take us. We hear it's going to be wonderful. The proof of the pudding, of course, will be in the eating. But Agribots to landslides. Well, come on then. Let's hear all about it, Gary.
Thanks, Tony. And hopefully, Cinderella, you will go to the ball. So lovely to meet everybody this morning. My name is Gary Littledyke. I'm one of the project managers on the 5G Rural Dorset project, and I'm here with my colleague Ben, who's one of the project support officers, and Ben's going to speak to you a little bit later. So before I talk about 5G Rural Dorset as a project, I'm going to just make a few general comments about what 5G is and why we need to do more research and development. There are some features of 5G that mean it's a step change when compared to 3G and 4G. There are some things you can do with 5G that you just couldn't do with previous generations of mobile connectivity. So yes, it's faster, absolutely, but it can support many more devices, and that's really important. It's much lower latency, so the round trip time, if you like, from your device to the network and back again is much shorter. In 2020, there were 6.6 billion connected devices globally. 6.6 devices connected per person globally in the world. When we look at 5G, there's no one silver bullet. There's not one application of 5G that's going to justify the investment from the mobile operators in rolling out the infrastructure. As you'll appreciate, it costs quite a lot of money to build mobile phone masts and connect them to the core network. And typically they'll do that based on generating revenue for the network and for their company. In rural areas, and for 5G in particular, we're looking at what we call stackable use cases. So there may not be one single application for 5G that justifies the infrastructure. We may need to find 3, 5, 7, or 342 that combine together and get us to that threshold, that tipping point where the investment is justified from the mobile operators. So a bit more about the 5G Rural Dorset project then. So it's an £8 million R&D project led by Dorset Council. It's part funded by the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport as part of their 5G testbed and trials programme. We're one of a number of projects focusing on rural applications of 5G. It's a 2-year project. We're just about halfway through now, and the project ends on the 31st of March next year. So you might ask, why Dorset? Well, there's a number of reasons. Connectivity, for anybody that lives in Dorset or visits it will know, number one, mobile connectivity is not very good here. Number two, generally connectivity is an issue. There are no motorways. It feels like it takes twice as long to get anywhere than it does anywhere else in the country. This restricts our economy. Productivity in rural Dorset is far lower than the UK average. Poor digital connectivity contributes an estimated £280 million a year to that gap. We've got an older population than average, so social care spend is more than half of the budget for Dorset Council, and there are pockets of deprivation in coastal areas such as Portland. Public safety is an issue along the coastline, as many of you will know. People from across the world enjoy our beautiful landscape, but it can be dangerous. And tourism, of course, is our biggest industry. So technology can help to address some of these challenges and help people to stay safe when they're visitors. So there are a number of partners working with us. Some of them are household names that you'll recognise. Some of them are smaller SMEs that bring specific expertise to the project. And we also have a number of additional supporters, supporting partners who bring their expertise and knowledge to the project as well. And again, you'll recognise some of these names and some of them not so much so. So a bit more detail about why we're doing this. So we're contributing, Dorset Council wants to be at the leading edge of this and helping UK PLC and central government to understand what we can do with 5G. So we're really doing our part here. There's a bit of self-interest, as I said earlier. You know, we've got some challenges we face, particularly in Dorset, along with other very rural areas that we want to solve, and we think digital transformation could be part of that. We're aiming to help to create new opportunities across Dorset for those that live here, work here and visit our lovely county. So there are a number of research areas. This is slightly out of date, actually. Now there are more than 4. There are 5, including the one that Ben's going to talk about shortly, which was recently added to the project. We're looking to do things in rural areas. So it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's very expensive to build new mobile phone masts. And so we look at reusing existing infrastructure where we can, be they mobile phone masts or other kinds of assets. The big hitters in terms of the cost build-up for mobile phone sites is the provision of power, the provision of what they call backhaul, so getting that mast connected back into the core network of the mobile operator, and the planning process and getting planning for a site. So clearly, if you can use existing infrastructure that's got one or all of those key features available, that starts to bring the cost down and make it more affordable. So I talked about a number of different testbed areas. Some of them are relevant to the coastal question and some of them aren't. In particular, we're going to go in a bit more detail into the connected coast element of the project, and Ben's going to talk about coastal cliff monitoring as well. So just looking at these in order. So there is a future of food element to the project, and this is where Tony, the robots come in. So historically, of course, any farmers on the call will know that you treat an entire crop as it needs to be treated with pesticides or whatever it is, chemicals you need to put on the crop to help it to grow and protect it from nasty little things that might eat some of it. What we're doing now in the new world with drones and robots is we're treating that field. We're taking an image of the field and you can look at it and analyse the pictures to determine if that crop is healthy or not, the status of the crop. And then you can spot treat little parts of that field based on what's needed for that specific part of the field. Now, there's a number of benefits there, of course. It reduces the cost of the treatment you're delivering to that crop, but it also means there's not as much chemical going into the ground, which ultimately, of course, leaches into the water supply, and therefore it reduces the cost of treatment and obviously benefits the environment as well. So some fantastic work going in on that part of the project. The connected coast part of the project has a number of elements in it. So digital signage, you will have come across various different signs at different parts along our coastline. And of course, it's static, it's not easy to change it. One of the things we're trialing here is how we might use 5G to deliver up-to-date dynamic information into those signs. So we've got a number of locations, including places like Lulworth Cove and Durdle Door, where we're going to put digital signage, working closely with the landowner, that's going to display a range of information. So there's going to be safety information. We've got a buoy located in Lulworth Cove that's going to monitor the temperature, the wave direction, the wind direction, the speed of the wave, and all that kind of information, which will be of use to people and help them to make informed decisions about what they're going to do, whether they're going to go into the sea or not. It's also going to be used for providing information about, where else to visit in Dorset, what else might be in the vicinity, and any events that are coming up. We're also working closely with partners to display information about wildlife that might be sighted in the area, and generally just provide useful information to people that are visiting. We've also got a number of other features here. We've got a high footfall trigger. So again, any of you that have been to some of those locations in the height of summer when it's very busy can see that it becomes very crowded very quickly. Car parks get full. So a trigger to help the landowner to understand when they're approaching a full facility means that they can manage that better. They work with the council and other stakeholders to get people on the ground, to close roads, to open overflow car parks, and all those kind of things as well. I'm now going to hand over to Ben, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the coastal cliff monitoring part of the project.
Thanks, Gary. So this element of the project commenced in March 2021. So just recently, that's when we welcomed the British Geological Survey into the project. And they're going to be working with other partners that are already existing, Bournemouth University, Vodafone, and our colleagues in the project engineering department at Dorset Council. British Geological Survey will be undertaking all the science research and lending their expertise to that. And we're going to be conducting the research at Lyme Regis and Burton Bradstock. So based on their expertise, we're going to be monitoring water saturation of the soil, 3D orientation of devices, and sudden movement due to soil displacement, as well as some underground soil activity. The devices that we're going to be developing will be in waterproof casings, and then there will be a silicone-based coating that will protect the electronics against any corrosion. The data analysis will be developed by Bournemouth University and along with Vodafone. There's two aspects there of a data management platform, and Bournemouth University will be creating a data visualization piece of software to be able to look at all the information that is coming through. So the possibilities from this project, because obviously we'll be finishing at the end of next March, we'll be looking at the existing technologies to assess the potential development of near real-time warnings. The aim of the trial here will be to look at the sensors and demonstrate how they might be integrated into the context of that early warning system. And the sensors that we'll be looking at developing will lend themselves to providing a first alert that a significant event has occurred. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Kev. That's fantastic. So as you can see, we're doing some really exciting work here on the 5G Rural Dorset project, and I'm happy to take any questions now if we have any.
Yeah, we've got one question from Peter Tinsley. How far offshore could 5G extend?
Thanks, Sarah. So it's a really interesting question. It depends on the frequency that's used. At the lower frequencies, you might get a couple of Ks over the sea. Out at the higher frequencies, much less than that. What they call the millimeter frequencies of really high throughput have very, very long range, a couple of 100 meters. But interestingly, we are in discussions with a number of partners about a possible follow-on project that we've started to talk to DCMS about around what we're calling connected buoys, with the idea of having connected buoys at sea that would extend that range out to provide slightly better coverage. And of course, many of you will know that there are projects out there based on satellite connectivity with Starlink and OneWeb, for example, where we're looking to get coverage in places that are really, really hard to reach, including once you get beyond the horizon and to see a bit further. So there are lots of exciting things that will be happening over the next few years that will help to get the unconnected connected. That answers the question.
Yeah. We've also had a comment from Nicholas Reed about the number of coast watch stations along the Dorset coast, and saying that the institution could play a useful role in developing the safety aspect of 5G implementation. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or.
Yeah, so we are working closely with the Maritime Coast Guard Agency and the RNLI, and we have had some discussions with Coast Watch as well. This is a very specific R&D project where we've got a certain scope for a certain amount of time, where we're looking to prove some of the benefits. I think longer term, once we've proved that 5G and a role to play in rural communities, I think there will be lots of opportunities to work with other stakeholders and build this forward.
Great. I think we've actually had somebody who wants to raise their hand, Howard Potter. I think he's got a question, so we'll just pop to him a second, see if this works. Okay, Howard, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. No, the obvious question I have, being involved in the coast and flood protection and being a sailor, is that 5G offers an opportunity for monitoring of the sea state with buoys and linking to weather modelling forecasts and indeed flood management modelling. So are we geared up to do these things with these two other data providers? That's what I'd like to know. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So very specifically, we work with a couple of companies who are looking at demonstrating what's possible in terms of a number of sensors that have been put on the buoys. Now, they've already said to us that there are many, many more different data sets they can collect and different bits of information, and that we can work with them with meteorological office and things like that. So, I mean, the potential is unlimited. There are so many things we could do. And one of the challenges for a short project like this is to, you know, we've already got the scope defined and we've got to demonstrate the things that we've agreed to demonstrate to DCMS. But we've made the point to them that there is so much more that could be done. We've got a very good relationship with them. They're very happy with the work we're doing, and we're hopeful that we will be able to do some follow-on work. And some of the things you referred to there, I would like to think might be included in future projects. Yeah. As you say, there are lots of opportunities to do good here. Excellent, very good, thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Gary, Ben. Really, really interesting, very exciting prospects there. Are we ready to move on? Are we okay to move on, Rhiannon? Yep. I think it's Matt Hosier. Matt Hosier, who is going to tell us about the Holes Bay FCRM, that's Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Project. It's over to you then. Matt, are you there? You okay?
Yeah, can you hear me, Tony?
Yes, indeed. Good, Matt.
Is my screen sharing okay with you?
Yes, it's fine. Fine at my end.
Great. Okay, I was just pinged onto mine. I just had a slow reaction on mine. Right, thank you very much. Yeah, my name's Matt Hosey. I'm head of Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management at BCP Council. I'm going to talk about a few different schemes, actually, all contained within Holes Bay in Poole Harbour. So the location we're talking about, Poole Harbour, hopefully everyone listening in will be familiar with Poole Harbour. So you can see that on the bottom left, the red square basically is Holes Bay, so situated to the north of Poole Harbour, and basically connected via the backwater channel, which runs between Poole town centre and the port. So quite a contained area. Just click on. One of the schemes I'm going to talk about is the Holes Bay salt marsh regeneration feasibility. So looking at regenerating areas where salt marsh is eroding, circled in yellow. And then also going to talk about the Poole Bridge to Hunger Hill flood defence scheme. You can see that highlighted with the orange line, so along the western flank of Poole town centre. And I'll also talk about a small couple of schemes we did in the north of the harbour, so Creekmore and Sturt tidal inlets. So three very different schemes, but nonetheless all contained within that small area. So I'll start with the salt marsh regeneration. The picture is 1914. I like people to look at the salt marsh in the upper part of the picture, so just beyond the town centre, looking pretty healthy at that point in time. I go on to the 1980s, and you can see that an awful lot of pressure on the habitat has caused a significant decline to the salt marsh. We've got the power station, an obvious feature, built on reclaimed land. We've got the marina just beyond that, which was obviously dredged out to provide that facility, and other pressures as well, just causing a severe decline to salt marsh in that area. Probably quite a familiar picture to many other harbour areas where we've seen salt marsh decline. This graphic is actually between 1924 and 1981, so 40 years ago actually was the end of that study. So we've had 40 years since that as well. So even with that, you can see there's significant decline in the salt marsh. A lot of it through land reclamation. So the power station area to the bottom part of that. On the right hand side, you can see where the A350 runs. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but the flank on the eastern side of Holes Bay was all reclaimed to allow that highway to be built. We've obviously got the railway, which bisects the bay as well, and other buildings which have put pressure through coastal squeeze onto the salt marsh. So significant decline, and that's only going to get worse with sea level rise. And there's obvious dredging within the area as well for the boating, for the marinas, for the boat operators and manufacturers. So that's all putting pressure on the whole system. What does it look like now? The aerial photograph on the right is 2019. So these are the areas that we get done as part of the regional monitoring programme. You can see it's a completely different picture. We've lost about 140 hectares since 1924, and there really isn't a lot left. So unless we step in and do something to put salt marshes back, it will disappear. So yeah, as I said, a familiar picture in other harbour areas as well. So what can we do about it? We've undertaken a feasibility study to see if we can start salt marsh reclamation or regeneration, sorry. We put in a local levy bid to the Wessex RFCC, Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, back in 2018, and were awarded £60,000 to undertake the feasibility. To put the studies fairly basically, we've focused on the dredging areas, so the Cobbs Quay to the left, Area 1, and the RNLI sites in Area 2, both places where dredging is undertaken to allow the movement of boating. That's currently deposited offshore. So we need to find out how we can actually reuse that instead and try and reclaim some of the key receptor sites. So Area 1 and 2 we've shown there as receptor sites, one of them directly south of the railway. So that would also provide protection to that asset. And Area 2 next to the A350, primarily because it's adjacent to the RNLI. So yeah, a lot of studies to see how we can make that happen. We're obviously in a highly designated area as well, SSSI, SPA and Ramsar. So a lot of stakeholders to engage with to understand how we can make this happen. Desktop studies looking at other projects around the nation have been undertaken as part of that. Listed there, Lymington was quite a key one, so we visited the site and talked to the engineers there as to how they make that happen, looking at all the key factors and lessons learned from all those projects. And I would say they are all very different in how they've succeeded. There's different constraints, there's different reasons why people might use different methods, whether that be the bathymetry or environmental constraints. There are a lot of different methods used. So we've taken a lot of those lessons learned and tried to look at what would work for Holmes Bay, having undertaken our own surveys, understanding the bathymetry, talking to our stakeholders around what constraints we've got. And yeah, that's helped us along the way of understanding which methods we'd use. We split it really into three main parts for the feasibility. One being the extraction of material from the dredge sites, how we can actually get that to the deposition sites, so the ways of placing that material, and then how we might be able to retain it as well. So various methods here. There's the cutter suction dredger. We've also got a backhoe which might dig it out, put it into a barge, and then you could pump from a barge to the shore. And then these ones are bottom dumping barges, which they use in Lymington, where they dredge into these barges. They actually motor on top of the salt marshes and just open up and place material onto the sites. I've talked about retention, so looking at things like coir rolls, rock rolls, geotextile bags, silk curtains, brushwood fabrics, all different types of ways of retaining material once it's there. So we need to pump the material into site, and then we need to hold it there to allow it to naturally allow salt marsh to grow. Cut the story short, preferred option for us, or actually really is the only option, is to use a cutter suction dredger. Because of the productivity and the bathymetry we've got, it's the only way that would really work for us. So that's basically got a dredge arm which agitates material and pumps it directly from a dredger to the site. We've done a lot of studies around how we can get the biggest bang for our buck, really, with salt marsh area, with the volumes that we might be able to dredge. So we've also looked at sediment retention as well. So the ways of retaining that. This is the hay bales that they use in Lymington, all staked out to retain that material to stop it going offshore. So that type of operation is what's our preferred choice. We're actually looking at heather bales, which would also help with the management of the local heathlands. But the next stages really are to liaise with these stakeholders for making this happen. So marina operators, getting them to change their contracts, or understanding how we can change their contracts to allow a different type of operation. They use backhoe dredging at the moment. The licensing and consent, we're unable to use a cutter suction with the existing licenses and consents. So we need to find out how we can adapt that, and if we can. And then going forwards, the funding parties. Network Rail are obviously a key player, but the marina operators as well are happy to fund to try and make this happen. Everyone is willing to try and create the environmental enhancements that this offers. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment, and we're just entering into the stakeholder liaison phases. I'll move on to the next scheme, so Pool Bridge to Hunger Hill, which is a traditional flood defence scheme. Highlighted with the green line in front of us there. You can see it runs from the A350 to the left-hand side, all the way around to the old Pool Bridge on the right-hand side, protecting the town centre as a whole. And you can see the pictures there on the right of the historic flooding. So the Peugeot garage there is just next to the old Pool Bridge at the end of the green line. So yeah, significant present-day flood risk, which is only going to get worse with time and sea level rise. I would say over the last 15 years or so, the councillors, I guess, expected developers to come in and build, and in doing so, produce flood defences as part of the developments that are put in place. But in reality, that hasn't happened. So there's a lot of empty sites along that frontage, which have been waiting for development for a number of years. So we really took the direction as a council to lead on the flood defences. The only way that was going to happen is to actually deliver a single scheme across the whole of the frontage, and put the flood defences in place in one hit, really, to unlock the flood risk and then to allow developers to come in and develop once that's done. We presented to landowners and developers back in July 2019. We knew that it would need a considerable contribution at that time, having done our studies and looking at the partnership funding calculator for flood defence grant and aid. And that was met very positively from stakeholders. We were talking around a £7 million contribution, but split between all the areas that was deemed as very good value for money, if all the flood risk could be mitigated. We put in a local levy bid for £310,000 again to the Wessex RFCC, which was successful. And we've basically been working on that OBC or between 2019 and 2020. So that was finished last year. Key factors in the OBC: really poor condition existing assets. You can see that on the left-hand side. From an engineering perspective, we'd deem these assets have already failed, really. So yeah, not a lot of life left in the frontage. Couple that up with the flood risk. You can see on the right-hand side, the flow route from the frontage we're talking about takes us all the way through to the town centre. So a significant flood risk to the whole of Poole town centre. There have been flood defences put in place, which you can see on the blue line, but nevertheless, water could come in through the back door if we didn't do the last piece of the jigsaw. So considerable flood risk. Yes, the OBC, as I said, was completed in 2020. We submitted that in October last year after taking through Cabinet in September. There are actually rule changes to flood defence grant and aid back last June, and that benefited the scheme, whereby we were successful in attracting £12.5 million of flood defence grant and aid without a need for a contribution. So those rule changes made a big difference to this scheme. Great in the sense that we could crack on and deliver without the complexities of legal agreements and trying to make it happen with a broader array of stakeholders. Really big opportunity for us for regeneration as well, obviously, if we can get on and build. And we took that to the EA Large Projects Review Group back in November, and they approved it in January this year. So the stage we're at the moment is getting on with the detailed design. Obviously really heavy on stakeholder engagement. So we've been meeting with all of the landowners and developers to try and understand what their current plans are, trying to tie in with planning applications they already have in place, and also trying to make sure that we achieve the aspirations of the council as a whole. So on unlocking the frontage, we should really be seeing these types of developments coming forwards now. There are many which are at the point of getting planning permission anyway, so they are forthcoming. We're working with those developers and landowners to understand how we can integrate our flood defences with allowing them to get planning permission and start with their developments. A huge plus for the council in the sense of regeneration, the aspirations for the frontage from planners around connectivity around the whole of the harbour to Holes Bay, so from the town centre. There's existing defences, or sorry, I should say developments being planned for the power station site as well, which is now which is no longer there, the power station. So there's an ability here to connect that all up and really change the face of Poole Town Centre. And we would look at the council managing that flood defence asset going forward. So we're really tying in with the regeneration directorate of BCP Council to make sure that we are trying to achieve what those bigger aspirations are. And I'll finish off with a smaller scheme which has been completed. So Creekmore and Sturt flood defences, so a different scale to the Poole Bridge to Hunger Hill. This is in the north of Holmes Bay. So you can see the flood risk map on the top. Sorry, on the right. I'll bring my cursor across. You should be able to see that. I don't know. Anyway, the flood risk to the Creekmore area is the blue patch in the top of the bay, and then where the railway line intersects on the right hand side, you can see the purple and blue patches, which is where there's flood risk for the Sturt inlet as well. Basically, there are two open channel inlets, or there were two open channel inlets, as you can see in the photographs. And that basically resulted in a high tidal flood risk, with obviously the spring high tides being able to flow up those channels and present that flood risk to the urban area landward of those channels. There's quite a combined risk there. A lot of surface water runoff, land drainage into those channels makes its way out through Holmes Bay to mitigate the flood risk of surface water. So if we have the combined events of a really high spring tide and very high rainfall, we could obviously have tidal locking, which would cause a lot of flooding to those areas. The outline business case that went through, which was back in 2016, looked at the combined risk, but the mitigation measures that were actually went through as a preferred option were just based on the tidal flood risk at the time. So there might be additional works in future to look after the surface water elements as well, but it basically succeeded as a business case based on those tidal flood risk elements. What did we do? Well, basically cut off walls on those open channels. You can see the diagrams there. The one on the left for Creekmore had a cut-off wall put in place, a one-way valve, and basically a deck on top of it, which allowed better flow of cycle traffic around the harbour. So instead of having to go up around that channel, as you can see in the paths, it just allowed the path to go across. So other benefits as well as flood defence. Similarly with Sturt on the right, again, a cut-off wall with one-way valves. So basically, if you had a really high spring tide, water couldn't get up the channels. But then if you had flow of water from surface water coming down the channels, the valves would allow that flow out into the harbour. If we had the instance of a combined event, a really high spring tide, then there'd be attenuation volume in that channel, so surface water could still run into it. And then as soon as the tide starts dropping, the flow would be allowed out into the harbour, showing that control of that flood risk. So what did that look like? There's a diagram there on the right of the basic setup of the sheet piled wall, the capping beam, the one-way valves in the middle of that, and the walkway above it. A couple of pictures of in construction there. So that's the wire stop valve, as it's called, the big steel drum that's being inserted into the cut-off wall. So yeah, they're fitted in place. I think it was around about 900 millimeter in diameter. The valves were, so it allows for a high flow. The total OBC values, as you can see there, 390,000 for Sturt, 250 for Creekmore. We actually procured it under a single contract in the end because they're very similar schemes, obviously, although they're two separate business cases. That was tendered, and Avon Construction built the schemes. And in total, the costs came in at 322,000 for Sturt and 203 for Creekmore, including all of the project management, the client project management, the licensing, consenting, etc. So well under the OBC values. And as I said, other advantages as well with improved cycle access around Holmes Bay, which has resulted really in our highways teams having an appetite for doing the same thing at Fleetsbridge, where there's less flood risk, but still an appetite to put a pathway around the perimeter of the bay. And that's a quick summary of those three projects.
Okay, my goodness me. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. That's a massive amount of work. It's really very impressive. And I congratulate you on pulling all that together. Have we got any questions, please?
Yes, we do. So one question regarding, I think, the salt marsh dredging programme from Councillor Mark Roberts. Will Cobbs Key and the RNLI contribute to the dredging programme costs?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and the answer to that is yes, they will. I would say that they're really supportive of what we're trying to do. So that at minimum, they would obviously cover the original costs they had of doing their dredging, which is via backhoe at the moment. But they also indicated that they'd be willing to put other monies towards any additional costs that might be required if needed for placing it in the receptor sites. I would say, just to add to that as well, Network Rail are a key beneficiary, and they've also indicated some really significant contributions covering most of the costs for the salt marsh regeneration.
And thank you, Matt. Question from Chrissy Neville. Have you any flood defence plans for around Shell Bay and the ferry crossing?
Well, the ferry crossing site obviously is benefiting from the existing beach renourishment of Poole Bay. So I would say yes, there is already investment in the area, but there's no additional works being planned in that area at the moment.
Okay, and we've got, I guess it's more of a comment, but you might want to respond from Howard Potter. Suggests that PCB buys at-risk sites and invests in proper defence works and then sells at premium rates for prime waterside development. This should deliver big investment yield for regeneration.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well, and it's quite complex particularly on the Poole Town Centre site. You probably might know that the council have recently purchased the power station site, so doing just that on that site, and yeah, many of these areas already have landowners who already have their own ideas of how they might want to invest and use those sites. And I would say that there will be significant contributions still coming, even though those rule changes benefited the flood defence grant and aid. We're really engaging with our regeneration colleagues in BCP to make sure that the aspirations for the promenade and the connectivity between the town centre are achieved, and that will be through making sure either SIL or Section 106 contributions through the developments are channeled into the sort of final product, as it were. So we're really focusing on just delivering the flood defence as a plain project, and then using those benefits of those developments and the other contributions coming forward to really finish it off as a proper regeneration project.
Fantastic, thanks. That's all we've got in the Q&A. So over to you, Rhiannon and Tony.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, our penultimate presentation this morning is Alex Curd, who's a marine planner with the MMO, and he's going to tell us a lot more about the South Marine Plan. You might all know that the South Marine Plan is now up and running. He's going to fill us in with the details. It's over to you then, Alex.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I've been having some connection issues, but we'll give this a crack and see how it goes. Can everyone see my screen? Is that fine? And you're not getting my notes?
No, we can see it.
Okay, brilliant.
All good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So I'm Alex Curd. I'm national planner within the marine planning team with the Marine Management Organisation. Today I'm filling in for Lauren James, who is the South planner for the MMO, and so she would usually run engagement in the South area for yourselves in Dorset and some of South Devon and that whole area. But unfortunately she couldn't be here today, but will be here for future meetings. So today I'm just going to cover a bit on the MMO, its approach to plan making, go into the South Marine Plan, just to explain what the Marine Plan means essentially. And then we'll go into a bit on Explore Marine Plans, which is our digital service. I would then take you through a bit of a policy walkthrough, and we would just go through a few different types of different policies that we have within the plan. And then I'll finish it on just a bit of our marine licensing team. So the Marine Management Organisation are a statutory marine planning authority in English waters, and we were established in 2010 through the Marine and Coastal Access Act, sponsored by DEFRA. And so the MMO is the independent regulator for English seas, and the MMO has 6 main functions, which are listed here. We are a non-departmental body which sits under DEFRA, so we license, regulate and plan marine activities in seas around England so that they are carried out in a sustainable way with the aim of preserving the marine environment. So in addition to being the statutory marine planning authority and developing marine plans and licensing marine activities, some of our responsibilities include managing the English fishing fleet in respect to capacity and quota, enforcing marine conservation bylaws, licensing, and being part of the initial response to marine emergencies. So we have a licensing team, a blue belt team, a marine planning, enforcement, evidence team to underpin our plan policies, and then finally our marine conservation team. So this slide basically shows the remit of the MMO and our responsibilities in the marine area. As you can see, our jurisdiction ranges from the mean high water spring mark out to 200 nautical miles. So there are a lot of organisations that have overlapping functions in this area. And so this figure just shows the different responsibilities that they are throughout. So why marine planning? Firstly, there is an increasing use of the marine area by many sectors, and this requires a strategic and considered management approach to avoid conflict. Secondly, it is also a requirement under the Marine and Coastal Access Act of 2009. So, as I said, marine planning is essential to manage the increasing demands on space and resources by making sure that the right activities happen in the right place and in the right way, and placing sustainability, sustainable development at the centre of all our decisions. And so marine plans also promote the coexistence of activities and allows for multiple activities to happen in the same place and potentially even at the same time, as the marine plan consists of different elements such as the seabed, the water column and the surface. So therefore you can have multiple activities happening at the same time. You can also have multiple activities happening in the same location, but at different times of the year, as another example is coexistence. And so marine planning essentially places stakeholder views and evidence and data at the heart of the process. So everything we do, we make sure is supported by stakeholder views and evidence, as I believe some of you would have been involved in our various iterations and workshops that we've done over the past years. So this flowchart just shows marine planning legislation in a bit more detail. So in 2009, the Marine and Coastal Access Act provided the domestic legislative basis for the marine planning system. The Marine Policy Statement was adopted by all UK administrations in March 2011, and this provided the policy framework for the preparation of all UK marine plans. And it contains a range of policy objectives and considerations which are used to inform decision-making in the absence of a marine plan. The marine plans then translate the Marine Policy Statement into a more detailed policy and spatial guidance for each marine plan area. And specifically, Section 58 of the Marine and Coastal Access Act states that all public bodies making authorisation and enforcement decisions which affect or might affect the UK marine area must do so in accordance with the adopted plan. All other decisions must be made with regard to the marine plan. For example, when a public or local authority creates reviews a local plan as well. So throughout England, we have 11 marine plan areas. This is within 6 plans themselves, and the plans themselves altogether cover approximately 231,000 square kilometres. So the inshore area is from the mean high water spring marks and the tidal limit out to 12 nautical miles. And then we have the offshore plan area that extends from 12 nautical miles to 200 nautical miles. So the southeast is the only plan area without offshore plan area. This is due to the border with France. And and the marine plan area boundaries themselves were identified by DEFRA using information expert advice and stakeholder views from a number of consultations that were held in 2009 and 2010. And finally, the plans themselves have a 20-year horizon, so the whole process will start again in 20 years' time. Well, in the south, it will actually be 18 years' time now. So the South Marine Plan extends from the River Dart in Devon to Folkestone in Kent. This area incorporates key areas such as the Solent and has important features such as the Jurassic Coast and is home to the Rampion. There are 6 AONBs, which are East Devon, Dorset, Isle of Wight, Chichester Harbour, High Weald and the Kent Downs, which are obviously designated for conservation due to their significant landscape value. The South Offshore Marine Plan area includes from 12 nautical miles to the maritime border with France and the Channel Islands, totaling approximately 10,000 square kilometres. The South Plan areas have a number of important ports, including Southampton and Portsmouth, and they contain one of the busiest shipping channels in the world. And they support significant fishing and agriculture activity and have a strong association with the defence of Britain. Tourism and recreation are also important, particularly boating activity supported by a large number of marinas and blue flag beaches. So this is the South Plan, South Marine Plan, which contains about 40 pages and contains all the policies and plan area vision and objectives. It is supported by the technical annex that's around 200 pages long, and this contains more detailed notes on policies and supporting text. The South Plan is also supported by the sustainability appraisal and the habitats regulation assessment as well. So why do people need to take account of the marine plans? Well, it is necessary for public authorities and decision makers to do this, and it is a legal requirement for the marine plans be considered in all decisions that affect England's marine area now and into the future. Decisions that take account of the marine plans have a reduced risk of legal challenge as they are supported by the plans and thereby the legislation that underpins the plans themselves. And marine plans provide a strategic approach to decision making and reduce the burden on applicants. And they do this by providing a further clarity which enables proposals to move more quickly from concept to consent, applying and clarifying national planning policy. These decisions will also be informed by the best available evidence and are considered against a wider context, both on land and at sea. And if decisions take account of the marine plans, England's marine area will be managed sustainably and time and money can be saved by all parties involved. So successful implementation will help to shape the prosperity of the region, drawing together the social, economic and environmental benefits of both marine and terrestrial environment. And hopefully this will strike a balance between local and national aspirations. And alongside this, the implementation or use of marine plans allows us to understand how effective the plan and policies are when we conduct a monitoring and reviewing process, make it easier to change the plans in the future. So the implementation or how we use or implement the marine plans is principally through how the marine plans are applied. And this will be done through decisions made by public authorities, for example, Minister of the Crown, us, the MMO, or a local planning authority or any other public body. Decisions these authorities make will need to be in line with Section 58.1 and 58.3 of the Marine and Coastal Access Act, which can also be referred to as MACO law. Section 58.1 requires all public authorities that take authorization or enforcement decisions, for example, on approval, confirmation or consent or permission, which affects or might affect the UK marine area, to do so in accordance with the marine plans, unless relevant considerations indicate otherwise. There is a guide available on the MMO website, which shows a worked example of how the MMO uses marine plans as part of the marine licensing decision-making process. This is, again, Section 58.1. So some examples of decisions that must be in accordance with the marine plan include the MMO approving a proposal for a marine license, the development of bylaws for the protection of marine conservation zones, or the granting of a wildlife license. Decisions made by the environment agencies, such as permitting flood or coastal defence works, and environmental permitting regulations, such as permits dealing with water discharges, waste, regulated industry, and water abstraction. And then lastly, any local planning authorities determining relevant planning applications in the intertidal area, possibly above mean high water springs, depending on circumstances and potential impacts of the marine area. Separately, Section 58.3 requires all public authorities making other decisions which are not authorization or enforcement, but can still have an effect on the marine area, must have regard to the marine plans. So this means other authority functions, such as the adoption of local plans or revisions of management plans for areas of outstanding natural beauty, and they must have regard to the marine plans under Section 58.3. However, as with all planning regimes, there is some discretion allowed to go against the marine plans themselves, and this is under Section 58.2, and this allows for decisions not in accordance with the plan as long as reasons are stated. And this can be in cases of imperative reasons of overriding public interest or other material considerations, such as scientific understanding, changes in scientific understanding, which could render some policies inappropriate. So there's a legal requirement for the MMO to monitor the marine plans under sections 54 and 61 of the Marine and Coastal Access Act. Every 3 years, we produce a report to Parliament on individual marine plan, and every 6 years, DEFRA will report on all the marine plans together. So we're now working on the South Marine Plan, and that should be released, I believe, sometime this year. So reporting to Parliament includes the effects of policies, the effectiveness of policies in securing plan objectives and progress towards regional objectives, such as the Marine Policy Statement. We also monitor the effectiveness of the marine plan policies by using data from indicators that feed into our cause and effect models or logic models, that's also known. So I'll just go through a relatively brief walkthrough of some of the policies that we have due to constraints. We can't introduce you all the policies here. So policies are the tools which deliver sustainability change in the marine environment. Furthermore, plan policies indicate how that change should be implemented and monitored. Each policy is a test of the proposal, and just like in terrestrial planning, plan policies test each marine license application in order to assess how proposals meets the vision, objectives, and policies of the marine plan. At the MMO, we ask that applicants provide any required information upfront at the start of the process. However, as with terrestrial planning, the MMO uses a proportionality principle when assessing applications in order to streamline the process as best we can. So marine plan policies are the means by which the marine plan objectives are achieved and how the overall outcomes of the marine plan are arrived at. Policies apply to new activities, and the plans do not apply retrospectively to any proposals that have already been accepted or already in place. Marine plan policies need to be applied as a whole rather than just individual policies, and this allows social and economic and environmental factors to be considered in decision-making process, and they're all on the same level, like no factor is given a greater weight than the others. It moves decision-making away from sector-specific and into more of a plan-led management as well. So there are a mix of marine plan policies that vary depending on where, when, and how an activity takes place, and also vary in strength from guiding to definitive, depending on the evidence-based stakeholder requirements, government policies, and other factors. We recommend proponents and decision makers follow the policy order prioritization walkthrough process included with the marine plan. And this is a 6-step process which allows policies to be assessed within the relevant context. The marine plan identifies which policies fall within which category. So I'm just going to give you a quick run through now, and so we can take a look at some of these different policies. So the first step is to assess policies which apply or are relevant across the whole of the inshore and offshore plan areas. So this policy example applies to climate change, and this policy CC2, which applies to all marine license applications and terrestrial developments that could be impacted by climate or coastal change. The second step is to look at these policies which show a clear preference for certain activities and define locations. These policies are spatial and provide support for relevant activities and precludes other activities or requires them to be compatible. So this policy, aggregate 1 policy, example here shows a preference for aggregate extraction in identified areas. The proposals must show their compatibility with that purpose in order to proceed. And the third step is to look at those policies which support existing use of the marine area. These policies do not preclude other activities, but they do require other proposals to work through a number of steps to reduce impacts on existing activities to ensure coexistence and the management of any potential conflicts. This policy, for example, Tourism and Recreation 1, requires that new proposals avoid, minimize, and mitigate significant adverse impacts on the already existing tourism and recreation activities within the marine area. So the fourth step is to look at those policies which safeguard areas for future preferred development. These policies either support a particular sector or require an applicant to work through a number of steps to prevent negative impacts on future activity. This policy, example, Aquaculture 1, aims to safeguard the potential areas of aquaculture production from sterilisation due to inappropriate development. The fifth step is to look at those policies which directly support certain sectors, support diversification of skills and enhancement or employment across all activities. Example policy here is Infrastructure 1 and links marine and land-based activities. This is an example where land-based activities and marine-based planning can cooperate to deliver proposals which benefit society and the economy. And finally, the sixth step is to look at those policies which support preferred methods or best practice in delivering a particular proposal. So the example shown here is the preferred method for the installation of undersea cabling, policy cables 1. The marine plan policies are applied bearing in mind any relevant considerations. This is where the differences and uniqueness of each plan area can be accommodated in line with the individual vision for each area as well. So the Explore Marine Plans is a digital service developed by the MMO. It has replaced the Marine Information System, which was the previous version we have, and it allows spatial identification for any proposed works that automatically scopes in the relevant marine policies. And here you can look at map data, which will show you different layers within, and you can also see which proposals have been put forward to for a marine license as well. And you can also look at the marine plan policies spatial areas, so you're able to draw polygons and have a look at certain where different policies apply in different areas, for example. So finally, we'll quickly take a closer look at marine licensing, I think, if we have time. Okay, so I think we're going over a bit, but I'll keep going on until I hear anything. So as a guide, decision makers should follow these points on this slide when using the marine plans to inform an authorization or enforcement decision.
Sorry, Alex, don't mean to interrupt your flow, but yes, yes, you are kind of out of time. So if we could just wrap it up, that would be great, because we've got one more talk to do. Thanks.
So I'll just go on to the, just a bit on licensing. This will be the final one. So the MMO licensing team make authorization and determine decisions in accordance with Section 58(1) of the Marine and Coastal Access Act. And so this allows us to meet our legal obligations. And so we move to plan-led decision making, and this leads to consistency in decisions making and improves our audit trail, builds a body of precedents, and allows us to validate our decisions and enable us to effectively monitor the implementation of marine plans and measure the positive impacts of the marine planning on the marine environment. And to ensure marine license applications are assessed against marine plans, the marine planning team has worked with the licensing team to create a plan policy assessment tool. which you'll be able to look at further on our public register. So finally, these are just some key links if you want to look at after if this presentation is able to be shared after this meeting. So thank you very much. Sorry about running over.
That's okay, sorry. Yeah, so or any presentations, just on that note, that people have given today, we will be sending them out, so they will be made available, and any links, because I think I've mentioned a few links, and there's been various links throughout the presentation, so don't worry, you'll get to see all of that. I think we have one question in the chat, but we'll just answer really quickly, which is from Josephine Parish, which is, can you give an update on the status of the management of the Studland MCZ, please? Will management happen this summer? I'm not sure if you know this, Alex, but I'm happy to pitch in.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know that, because that will be with our marine conservation team, or Lauren might know it because she is the lead in the south.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I can, this information will probably be coming out at a later date, but just a quick update for you. They're currently still looking at the feedback that they've received, obviously, from those events. And we've written a report, which is in their hands, and they're looking at now. So we do expect to hear an update very shortly, within the next month or so, I think. But at this time, I haven't got any information to give you on that, and whether measures will be in place this summer. So as far as we're concerned, you know, we've given the feedback, and they're still processing that at this moment. So we'll let you know as soon as any announcements are made. Tony, I think we've got one more presentation, haven't we, before we wrap up?
Indeed, we've got Sally King, who is the Visitor Tourism and Access Manager for the Dorset AOMB team. I gather she's produced a short film for us, Rhiannon, is that correct?
Yeah, she's pre-recorded something for us, so unfortunately there won't be any Q&A afterwards, but I do encourage you to listen to it, because it's a really interesting campaign and quite important for the Dorset coast this summer as well, especially given the level of visitors that will be flocking to us. So yeah, I'll hand over.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Dorset Coast Forum. I'm Sally King, Visitor Tourism and Access Manager for Dorset Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. And I'm going to talk to you today about visitor management in a protected landscape during a global pandemic. But first of all, a quick look at some of the challenges from summer 2020, last summer. Well, our beaches certainly didn't look like this post-lockdown. Most on-the-ground staff, for example, rangers, were furloughed last summer. There was a lack of any clear government guidance post-lockdown, and a heatwave throughout most of the summer, with a large proportion of the population on furlough, twiddling their thumbs and longing to get out to beauty spots like this one. There's a very different visitor demographic, with visitors who are seemingly quite unfamiliar with the natural environment and had little concept of things like the Countryside Code. And car parks initially were closed, which led to dangerous and inappropriate parking, and there was also a lack of open facilities such as toilets. All of which led to scenes like this, which I'm sure you're familiar with from the media coverage last summer. Tombstoning off Durdle Door, and emergency services having to land on an incredibly crowded beach. Loads of people heading down to Durdle Door with absolutely no social distancing. Literally tons of litter left on the beaches every day. Graffiti on the chalk cliffs, and the devastating forest fires, including the Wareham forest fire, which was probably the worst one. All of which led to some really negative publicity. So our visitors last summer came mainly from London and the South East, as well as the Midlands. And we spent the autumn and the winter reflecting and thinking forward, ready to this summer. And we realised that balancing the needs of the environment, the economy, communities and visitors has probably never been more challenging, certainly not in my career anyway. So to address the issues, back in March, the AOMB convened a large stakeholder group which included landowners and all organisations and partners involved in visitor management. I'm sure many of you in the room or on the screen would have been involved in that meeting. And that group has been actively involved in developing the summer visitor campaign, which I'll be going on to talk to you about in a lot more detail later on. There's also a Dorset Council Operations Group, which meets weekly, and then the subgroup, which is leading on the Summer Behavioural Change campaign, which includes myself from Dorset AOMB, Dorset Council Comms and Visit Dorset. And that project has been funded by central government. So while we wait for the campaign to be finalised, like most destinations in this country, we've been running with the Respect, Protect, Enjoy hashtag. So for the campaign, we've appointed a creative agency to develop the project, and it's based around a promise to love Dorset concept and 5 visitor promises. We're going for a really positive do approach. We think that people have really had enough of being told what not to do. So the 5 promises are based around do take care on our roads, do be aware of coastal dangers and promise to stay away from the cliffs, do respect our environment, promise not to have fires or barbecues, do take your litter home, and do be considerate of residents and promise to check where you can park or camp. So the first stage of the campaign is based around a static display material focused around the 5 key promises, as well as a generic one, which is the one that you can see here. And I'll run through them for you. But before I do that, just to say that this stage of the project has already had a soft launch. We launched before the May Bank holiday. And if anyone watching this is interested in sharing any of this material or using any of this material, then please do get in touch with us or go to the Visit Dorset website where you can find all the assets free to download. So do enjoy our epic coastline and promise to watch out for tides, currents and cliff edges. Do enjoy taking in our scenery, but drive carefully on our country roads. Do enjoy sharing wonderful places, check where to park and camp. Do enjoy our unique habitats, they're no place for barbecues or fires. And do enjoy our beaches and countryside, throw litter in bins or take it home. I just realised my image is covering the slogan at the bottom there, but it says do enjoy our wonderful county, promise to love Dorset. So the static display material will be used in locations such as supermarkets, as well as service stations en route to Dorset. And there'll also be a promise poster, which can be used by town, parish councils, local businesses, holiday parks, as well as cafes and shops and so on. So the second part of the campaign is the video approach, and a set of 5 videos will be produced, which will reflect the 5 promises. These will also be hosted on the Visit Dorset website, so free to download for all partners who've been involved in the development of them. The feel and the tone of the videos is very upbeat and energized and positive, and reflecting the visitors' enthusiasm at coming back to Dorset and the community's, hopefully, welcoming their return. They're short, punchy and impactful, but will still carry the necessary important messaging. And the voiceover used will be a regional Dorset accent, although not too extreme, but it'll be identifiable as Dorset. And the voiceover will reflect the core demographic of the new visitors that we saw last summer and who we're trying to appeal to with the campaign, so 25 to 45-year-olds. And the narratives will again use the do approach, so really outlining the positive things that people can do and ways they can behave that will help them to have a great holiday, but also to keep Dorset special. And the scripts, I'm not going to read this out, and I don't expect you to, but you can see that they're based on the 5 promises. Hopefully this will work. I just want to play this really short, quick video for you. It's just a taster, really, of the type of thing that we're talking about. And in terms of marketing, there'll be a mixture of marketing approaches, from online, social media, to a variety of locations such as pubs, shops, service stations, and so on. And the budget for all of this, so the development of the creative approach and all the marketing behind it, has come from a central government COVID recovery fund. And I also just wanted to mention Dorset Council's operational plans, which came into place for the first May bank holiday, or even Easter, and will remain in place throughout the entire summer season. So more civil enforcement officers, for example, parking wardens, more tow-away areas, additional bins and waste collection, additional temporary signage at beauty spots where it's really necessary. Ambassadors are being recruited, and temporary PSPOs on beaches to deter wild campers is a possibility. Wild camping was a very serious issue last summer. And also working with farmers to open up additional camping and parking areas if necessary. That can raise its own issues. And of course, we also want to monitor and evaluate the impact of the behavioural change project. So we've been working with behavioural research consultants based at Winchester University, and we've applied to the National Geographic COVID-19 Science Fund. We've got through to the final stage and actually just recently submitted the final application. So it's a relatively small sum of money, 37,000, to monitor and evaluate the impact of the work, and also to assess the ecological and environmental impacts of visitor behaviour during and since COVID. So we're looking at, because of the smallish sum of money, we're looking at pilot projects at Lulworth, Durdledore, Sutherland and Old Harry Rocks, and those pilot areas were chosen as places where we can relatively easily and quickly access baseline data. It's hoped that it might lead to further funding, possibly lottery, and then we could do a longer term analysis of visitor behavioural trends over the next few years, which would be fantastic. So that's it from me. As I've said, please do get in touch if you're interested in sharing any of the material and the assets from the campaign. We would really love you to, because the wider we get the messages out there, the more impact they're going to have. I've also mentioned Visit Dorset a few times throughout this presentation, so their website address is visit-dorset.com, and all the material is hosted on that website. But do get in touch if we can help at all. Thank you very much. Enjoy the conference and hope to see you in real life soon. Bye. Hello, Dorset Coast Forum.
Hello. Right. So yeah, Sally's not with us today, so that kind of concludes our presentations. But as Sally said, I really hope that you do look out for that campaign. Obviously, it's really important with everything, the impact and the influx of visitors that we're going to be getting this summer. We have just got, before I wrap up, a quick poll that we wanted to ask our members, really, just around kind of how you would like to see future Dorset Coast Forum annual events delivered. So it should be popping up on your screen right now. So it's multiple choice. It just really helps us to plan how we're going to go forward. So would you like a meeting in person, an online webinar like this, or a mixture of both online and in-person options? Obviously, that's subject to the kind of technology that we can access, but we know that a few of you kind of miss these face-to-face meetings, but that also it makes it more accessible for others who can kind of just drop in and out rather than driving to somewhere for a full day. So it's just interesting for us to know. So I think there's just a few more people kind of voting there, but it looks like for most of you, it's a mixture of both online and in-person options. So that's really helpful for us to plan our future events. I really hope that you've enjoyed today, that you find it informative and useful. I don't know if Tony, you have any closing remarks?
No, I'm delighted with the technology, fraught on a couple of occasions, but no, the quality of the technology matched the quality of the speakers. So no, I'm very pleased the way it all went. And again, it's all credit to everybody who's put this together.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you to all of our speakers today. Thank you to everybody who's attended this event. We hope to see you in future. We'll be back with another online event when we can. Hopefully sort of a mixture, as you say, of online and face-to-face. Yeah, just look out for all those campaign messages and a follow-up email with all of the speakers and their presentations from today. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.